We turn to the questions today around the deployment of the Australian Defence Force for domestic security. Chris Minns has talked about this. The Prime Minister has talked about this. In a piece in today's Australian, former senior military officer Ian Langford argues that while confronting anti-Semitism is essential, using the ADF is a cost-driven shortcut. He says it risks blurring the constitutional lines, weakening civilian policing and distracting the military from its core mission, which is defence. And I'm pleased to say Ian joins us now from Rome. Ian, thank you for your time. If governments keep reaching for soldiers, the ADF, because it's politically easier, isn't that a failure to properly fund the civilian side of policing?
Well, thanks for your time and Happy New Year to your viewers. Yes, I think in many respects, this latest tragedy in Australia and the testing of our counter-terrorism and public security framework just reminds us of whether or not the question as it relates to learning from these incidents and being able to generate the kind of effective public safety and law enforcement response is appropriate. We've had multiple instances since the 1960s. We've had the Hope Royal Commission, the Marks Report into counterterrorism. We have high-risk events where defence and law enforcement cooperate together. We have the 2019 bushfires. We've got the 2020-23 COVID emergency, and then this tragedy in Bondi last week or so. And every time it seems to me that we recognise that we are under-resourced in many respects of our public safety and law enforcement. And too often it's tempting for politicians to point to the military as a labour force, which is essentially sitting as a sunk cost on the balance sheet, which can be used to fill these law enforcement gaps. And I think that's a mistake.
Now, Ian, because of your background, you understand that the role of our Defence Force is to be a lethal force so that when our enemies look at us, they see a lethal, powerful force. That's their role. Does it distract them from that role if they then have to turn around and provide domestic security and look after people domestically? Does it distract from the main role?
The short answer is yes, and I should caveat that by saying there are sudden and extraordinary instances where it is appropriate to use the military in counter-terrorism, for instance, where a situation beyond the capabilities of law enforcement requires a high-level response, and that's appropriate, and the Constitution allows for that. But using soldiers as security guards, using soldiers as a replacement for a domestic humanitarian response where civil agencies and others have that responsibility, and I might add, in certain instances, are resourced to do that, really is a distraction for the ADF. And this comes at a time where we have exercises off Taiwan by the People's Liberation Army in East Asia just this week, talking to how dangerous a period we're moving in. So the ADF needs to focus on defending the nation. Police and law enforcement need to focus on public safety. There are instances where military force is appropriate, but they are very exceptional, and the Constitution allows for that. But we cannot reach for the ADF as a first resort every time as a labour force, because their role is to protect and serve the nation. And frankly, it's against enemies that are hostile and foreign, and not criminals that live onshore here.